Chapter 14. On February 14th, 1953, Valentine's Day, Caroline Bender received a dozen long-stemmed red roses from Paul Landis with a humorous card. Mary Agnes Russo received a box of chocolates in a heart-shaped red box trimmed with white paper lace from her fiancé Bill. Greg Adams didn't know it was Valentine's Day because she had a hangover and she was trying to revive herself sufficiently to attend a general audition for the ingenue lead in a forthcoming Broadway play, a role requiring a girl with clear eyes and a winningly fresh face. Barbara Lamont stopped on her way to work to buy some heart-shaped candies for her daughter Hillary, and April Morrison fainted on the sidewalk in front of Rockefeller Plaza. When April revived, she was lying on a bench in a travel agency. She thought at first she had died and was laid out on a marble slab. The next thing she thought was that she had never been so nauseated in her life, and if all those strangers didn't go away and stop staring at her, she would throw up right in front of them. "Are you all right now, honey?" a woman asked. She had a round, white face with black mascara on her eyelashes that made each eyelash stand out separately. April concentrated on those spiky eyelashes. That woman looked just like Betty Boop. And finally the nausea receded, and she could breathe again. "That's right, honey. Take a deep breath now. Drink some more of this water." April sat up. "I have to go to my office. What time is it?" "Only 9:25. Drink some water." "No. Number, I hate water." Why hadn't she realized before that the taste of water made her sick to her stomach? "Thank you for looking after me. I have to go to work now." "You look awful pale, honey." "So do you," April wanted to say. She felt strange, warm and secret, and like laughing softly to herself. She felt completely away from everybody else, from the kind woman with the paper cup of water, from those people looking through the travel agency window, from all the noises of Fifth Avenue traffic she could hear as she opened the door. "Thank you," she said. "I'm all right now. I'm fine." As she rode up in the elevator to the 35th floor, April automatically folded her arms across her stomach. Wasn't that silly when she was sure that whatever was in there was the size of the head of a pin? But she had to protect it. It was hers. At first, when she had suspected she was pregnant, she had been terrified. She had run to the ladies' room so many times to look and see if at last, perhaps it wasn't true that Miss Farrow had begun to make sarcastic remarks. She had no idea what had given her the presence of mind to have lunch with Barbara and ask her, casually, very casually, in the guise of interest, who was the baby doctor who took care of Hillary now. For some reason, she had thought a pediatrician was as good as a gynecologist in cases like this, but when she had gotten to the office, the pediatrician had sent her to another doctor. She didn't dare say her name was Mrs. Key. Someone might have heard of Dexter. Someone might ask questions or talk. She had tried to think of a nice, refined, married-sounding married name, and finally she had thought of Mary Agnes, the most blamelessly married girl she knew. She had said her name was Mrs. Russo. The doctor had had no reason not to believe her. "I'd say you're about 6 weeks pregnant, Mrs. Russo." "Thank you," April said. "Would you please give me the bill now? I'll pay it while we still have the money." She gave a self-conscious little laugh, just so the doctor wouldn't be insulted at having to talk about money. The gynecologist had given her a careful look. "My nurse will give you the bill," he said pleasantly. "Here's a prescription for your vitamins, and on your way out, you can make an appointment for next month." How easy it seemed to him. "Come back next month, Mrs. Russo." And the month after that, and the month after that, she would never see him again. The next time she went to a doctor, she couldn't say, "I'm not Mrs. Russo anymore, I'm Mrs. Key." So she would have to find another doctor. That wouldn't be hard. Once she was Mrs. Key, she could ask her in-laws. At first, she had wanted to tell Dexter the news instantly. She couldn't wait. But the night after her visit to the doctor, Dexter had to go to someone's party without her, and she couldn't tell him on the telephone. She had sat alone in her apartment, thinking of how best she could tell him, and a great warmth and serenity had settled over her. Who would have believed it? The terrible thing, being disgraced, the fear, wasn't such a monster after all. Somehow she felt rather proud of herself. She was going to have a baby, she and Dexter, Dexter's child. It was a love link, a bond, and even more, a person. Already she thought of the baby as a person, not a formless speck. She sat in her armchair, surrounding and guarding her baby, and she didn't feel like an unwed mother at all. She felt like a kind of Madonna. Was that sinful? Shouldn't she be afraid? But April felt a great peace and calmness. This morning, when she had fainted in front of the office, was her first sick day. After work, she met Dexter at his apartment. She sat on his sofa and allowed him to put a cold drink into her hand, and the entire time she was savoring the last instant of special secrecy before she would share her news. She couldn't imagine what he would say, but she knew he would take care of everything. Dexter could always cope with anything. "I want to play my new record for you," Dexter said. "Wait till you hear this." "Dexter?" He turned, already kneeling over the phonograph, the record in his hand. "What?" "What's it called?" "It's an old classic. Bix Beiderbecke. I had to brush 2 inches of dust off it in the back room of the record store before I found it." She would listen to the record. She had time. It was like savoring the last bittersweet moments of near passion before you gave yourself up to it. She was dying to tell him, but she would wait, because she could only tell him once, and it had to be right. She hardly heard the music. It came to her through a fog, in isolated snatches. "I am going to have a baby. Dexter, I am going to have a baby. How did you like that?" "Beautiful," she murmured. He put something else on the phonograph and came to sit beside her. He put his head on her shoulder. She put her arms around him and rested her chin on his head and stared across the room. She felt detached from him. The secret was all she could think about, the wonderful news that really should frighten her but didn't. She pulled away from him gently. "Dexter." "What, honey? Sit up, please." "Why?" "Well, just sit up, that's all. I want to tell you something." He sat up then, looking at her with an "it had better be big" look on his face. For some reason that made her lose patience with him, because it was big, and she blurted it out. "Dexter, I went to the doctor yesterday and he says I'm pregnant." He looked at her, eyes round, lips slightly parted, his hands hanging limply across his knees. He looked like a frightened little boy. "Is he sure?" "Of course. Some of these guys just like to scare you." "Did he take a test?" "Of course." He didn't say anything then. He just looked at her. "I had to tell you first thing," April said. "It's all right," he said, rather frantically it seemed to her. "Don't worry." She wanted him to be the one to do the proposing. It was only proper. She didn't want to say, "When will we get married?" She waited, and Dexter sat there looking frightened and worried and not saying anything at all. "What shall we do, Dexter?" "It's all right," he said. "It's all right, I'm thinking. The baby isn't due until next fall." He took a deep breath that was more like a sigh. "The sooner the better then, I guess. Are you free all next weekend?" Her heart leaped as if it were going to fly out through her throat. She felt happy tears come into her eyes. "We'll elope. It'll be crazy." He was scowling at her. "Elope?" "We'll have to call my parents first. It'll be such a shock to them. I told them all about you when I was home for Christmas, though, and I know they'll be happy." "We can't get married," Dexter said. "What do you mean?" "How would it look to be married now and have an 8-pound baby in 7.5 months? We couldn't pass that off as premature. I won't eat a thing, April said quickly. I'll practically starve myself. I'll keep it a very small baby. And already she was feeling sorry for her baby, who would be hungry before he was even born. Dexter shook his head. Don't be off in your little dream world, honey. This is serious business. We'll go away on Friday. Where? What for? He sounded so casual, you'd think he was talking about a social involvement they couldn't get out of. To take care of it. She clamped her knees together and moved away from him on the couch, as if he were already about to do something terrible to her. You wouldn't do that. Honey, what else can we do? She bit her lip to keep the words from coming out, but she had to say them. It was self-preservation. Romance was gone. She couldn't wait for him to propose, and already April felt as if she had died. The room was very white. We could get married. Married? How can we get married? Do you want to print a banner and run it up on a flagpole? Shotgun wedding? What are you going to do? Tell everyone to send the kid's birthday present 6 months late for the rest of his life? I want to have this baby, April said in a small voice. We'll have other babies. People die from abortions, she whispered. Look, Dexter said gently. You won't even feel sick. It's very clean. It's like a doctor's office. I'll go with you. How do you know so much about an abortionist den? Do you send all your girls there? She was angry and hurt, lashing out at him. Number, then how do you know? I know about these things, he said, slowly and clearly, trying to pacify her but visibly insulted. Have you ever taken a girl to an abortionist before? No. Really? Did you ever make a girl pregnant before? Not that I know of. Not that you know of. April's voice rose in her shock. Do you mean some girl became pregnant and didn't tell you? Some girls don't, he said quietly. But how can they not tell you? Maybe they're not sure I'd believe it was mine. You know that this one is yours, April said. Don't you? Yes. April covered her face with her hands. Oh, Dexter, let's not talk this way. It makes me sick. It sounds like we're talking about a lot of hard, awful strangers. It isn't us. We're different. It's going to be all right, honey, he said. You sit back and rest. I'll make you a drink. Do you think I should have a drink? It's not good for the baby. Dexter stared at her as if she were demented, and he had just realized it. Well, I don't see as how that makes a hell of a lot of difference now, do you? He said. He crossed the room to the bar and made her a drink and handed it to her. Here, drink it. You'll feel better. April held out her hand like someone hypnotized and accepted the glass. It felt hard and smooth and cold in her palm. She looked at it as if it might be poison and slowly lifted it to her mouth and sipped at the contents. It was only scotch and soda. But she wished it were poison. She wished it were hemlock so she might die and never have to face another day. In all her fantasies about unwed motherhood, April had never imagined the efficiency or the speed with which alien forces would mobilize to help her. With one half of her mind, she realized she should be grateful. There were total strangers with hearts in this city. Speed, they said, was important. It was almost as if they were all talking about a diseased appendix. Cut it out fast. Time is of the essence. And with the other half of her mind, April felt abused, about to be ravished, about to have something stolen from her, which she knew logically she had no right to keep, and which she knew emotionally she had to keep, or something else within her, something more important, would die with it. Because she knew that there was no chance she would be allowed to have this baby, unless she should run away, and where could she go? Every moment became very valuable to her. She felt as if she were spending the last days with someone she loved, whom she would never see again. She would never see this baby at all. She would never know if it was a boy or a girl. Perhaps it could have been a talented person, someone who would have done something for the world. But all these were emotional thoughts, and the other side of her mind kept saying, "You don't appreciate how lucky you are. What else could you do? It will all be over soon. You'll forget, and you'll be grateful that Dexter took care of everything." It was strange that now, even though there was no more reason to fear pregnancy, because it had already happened, she could not bear to have Dexter touch her. "You're such a fool," the logical half of her mind told her. "They say this is the best time for sex. It's the one time you'll really enjoy it because you won't be the slightest bit afraid of the consequences. You'll be sorry later you didn't take advantage of these last days." But the part of her mind that ruled her heart and her life said, "Keep away from me, Dexter, you destroyer." Dexter was gentle and almost seemed a little afraid to try to make love to her now. He would only make a tentative advance, which was unlike him, and then, when she demurred, he would give up. They did not discuss the baby or their appointment for the weekend, except for a few terse announcements about the time and place. Otherwise, he tried to be light and pleasant. He tried to pretend that nothing had changed. He was going to pick her up Friday evening at her apartment and take her to a doctor in New Jersey, or at least she hoped it would be a doctor. In her mind, she had a picture of a dried-up little man in a doctor's white jacket with long, dirty fingernails. Assisting him would be a gross woman who smelled of bacon fat with a round, bloated face. They would both hate her. They would both be thinking that she was going to do something dangerous and inconvenient for them, like die, and for that they despised her. They would both think she was a fool for not knowing any better than to get herself in this predicament. April didn't even dare think about her parents. Whenever she thought of her mother, and how her mother would feel if she mysteriously died, her heart almost stopped beating then and there. She wanted to go home, to her mother's arms, and confess everything and be cared for, but she knew that was impossible. Her mother would never be able to comprehend this terrible thing. It would be something that would hang over them for the rest of their lives. There was no reason to ruin the futures of an entire family. She had gotten into this trouble alone with Dexter, and she would get over it with Dexter. At least he hadn't run away. You had to say that for him. He hadn't left her side for a minute since she had told him. The only person April had told besides Dexter was Caroline. She had never expected the feeling of warmth she could get from a friend's honest concern, and Caroline's devotion was the only thing in this whole situation that comforted her. There was no panic in Caroline. "What can I do?" Caroline asked. And when April told her that Dexter had arranged for the abortion, Caroline had seemed to sense immediately how April felt about all men at this moment. "Have him drive you up to my house in Port Blair for the weekend," Caroline said. "You mustn't be alone in your apartment after an operation. You can stay with me and we'll take care of you. You'll rest and eat well and I'll keep you company. Dexter can stay too, or he can pick you up on Sunday night if you prefer." "Do you think he'll be insulted if I tell him I want to stay with you alone?" April asked. "Insulted?" Caroline's voice shook with emotion. "Insulted? What right has he to be insulted about anything?" "It's funny," April said. "I love him, but I just can't face being with him afterward. I know I'll say the wrong thing, or he will. I feel so strange. I know it sounds stupid to tell you everything will be all right, knowing the way you feel," Caroline said. "But believe me, it will be all right. All your friends love you. I love you. We all care very much what happens to you. If there's anything friends can do for you now, we'll do it." "I know," April said softly. "Thank you." For the first time in her life, she felt as if she had crossed over a bridge which had no way to return. She was 21 years old, but she was no longer a young girl in any way, and she could not turn to her family or any friends of the family for help, but only to her own contemporaries. Without her friends, she would be alone, and her friends understood how she felt and were not shocked, only indignant that she had to suffer pain and near disaster instead of having the husband and child she wanted more than anything in the world. Instinctively, April knew that if she were to tell Barbara, Barbara would feel the same way as Caroline did. "I'll come back with you after work on Friday and stay with you until Dexter comes," Carolyn said. "We'll have a drink or two and I'll help you pack for the country." "I'll feel scared facing your family," April said. "Your father's a doctor. Do you think he'll be able to tell from looking at me that something just happened?" Caroline laughed. "Do you think doctors have X-ray eyes? My father will take one look at your young, fresh face and leave us scrupulously alone so we can giggle together about our boyfriends." "Yes," April said. "So would mine. Thank God. My poor father." On Friday, April was almost unable to do any work. She tried harder than ever to concentrate on her typing, but all the time she was thinking how silly it was to be so careful not to make mistakes. Because Monday morning, Miss Farrow would probably have to ask for a new secretary. These letters, this work she was doing in the office, suddenly took on a great importance, as if she had already died and was looking at them from a poignant, untouchable distance. Like Emily in our town after she had died, she wanted to make a mark somewhere, leave something, and on an impulse, she took her initialed handkerchief out of her purse and tucked it under the edge of her blotter. They could find it on Monday. But when 5 o'clock came and it was time to make the mad rush out of the office for the elevators, April reached the door of the bullpen and then came back and took the handkerchief out of the blotter and put it back into her purse. She didn't want anything of her own to remain alone and unprotected if she was not there to own it, not even a handkerchief with her name on it. It was only a short walk from the office to April's apartment, but Caroline insisted on taking her there in a taxi and paying for it. Upstairs, April sat on her chair and looked at the furniture in her room, hardly seeing it. Caroline was briskly removing underthings and a nightgown from the bureau drawer and looking for April's suitcase. She had brought a pint bottle of gin. "You'll never get high enough on scotch," Caroline said. "Where do you keep the orange juice, or haven't you any?" "I don't know." "I'll go downstairs and get some. You stay here, don't move." "Where would I go?" April asked hopelessly. Caroline returned in a few minutes with a paper container of orange juice from the grocery store. "This is the special Harvard weekend punch," she said cheerfully, mixing it in a pot she had found on the stove. "You don't even taste the gin, and then—" Boom! April smiled weakly. "More innocent girls have been seduced as a result of this punch than you could imagine," Caroline went on. "You won't even want an anesthetic." "They're not going to give me one." "Well, I'm giving you one. Old Caroline is here. Drink this, my dear innocent girl." April sipped at the drink, forcing the sweetness past the obstruction that seemed to have lodged in her throat. Even at that moment, knowing everything was settled and almost finished, the thought came to her that orange juice was good for pregnant women. She wondered whether someone who was about to be put into the electric chair and was being given his last dinner would refrain from eating dessert because he was on a diet. "I would," she thought, "but then I'm a fool." The doorbell rang and April jumped. Caroline walked to the door and opened it. "Hello, Dexter," she said sweetly, as if he had come to pick up April to take her to the movies. How proper Dexter was, how polite. He smiled and asked Caroline how she was feeling. April wondered whether he was resenting the fact that Caroline was there. Caroline was telling him how to get to Port Blair from the Merritt Parkway, and he was nodding studiously. "We may be a little late," he said. "I know it will be long after dinner." "The cocktail party," April thought bitterly, "may last longer than we expect." Her palms were moist and her heart was pounding in terror. "Perhaps," she thought, "I'll lose the baby right here and save us all that trouble." He helped April on with her coat and lifted her suitcase. When April started down the stairs, it was Caroline, not Dexter, who held her arm. It was the closest April had come in the entire time to bursting into tears. They came out into the early darkness of a winter evening. The street was lighted with street lamps, and there was a small crowd of neighborhood children gathered around the curb. At the curb, in front of April's apartment house, there was a long, black, shiny Cadillac limousine, the kind with 2 rows of seats in the back instead of 1, and a closed-off front seat compartment for the chauffeur. The chauffeur got out of the car when they approached and opened the door to the back. He was a small, wiry man, dressed in a grayish uniform with leather boots that made him look a little like a Western Union messenger. Dexter handed April's suitcase to him and reached inside the car, bringing out a huge bouquet of pink roses wrapped in green florist's paper. "For you," he said, laying the bouquet in April's arms. "Whose car is that?" April whispered. "I rented it. Shall we go?" He held out his hand to Caroline. "Goodbye, Caroline. I'd drop you off at the station, but we have an appointment, and we mustn't be late. We'll see you later this evening." "All right," Caroline said. She kissed April on the cheek. "I'll see you soon. You look like a star after opening night with those flowers." "Don't leave me," April wanted to say, but instead she smiled. "Goodbye." She allowed Dexter to help her into the limousine while the chauffeur held the door open. She had never been inside a car like this, and despite her nervousness about what was going to happen to her, she began to feel almost cheerful again. The gin and orange juice that Caroline had made her drink made her feel rather light-headed, and the roses in her arms were cool and silky to the touch and smelled beautiful. Dexter settled beside her and lighted a cigarette. "All right, Fred," he said. There was a remote control panel in the armrest of the back seat that could turn the radio on. Dexter tuned it in to play soft music. As the limousine crept through the traffic, April could see people turning around to look at them, and when they stopped for a light, the people in the cars waiting next to theirs turned their heads to see who was inside such a distinguished-looking car. Perhaps they thought she really was a star, with those roses and the chauffeur, and Dexter looking so handsome and sophisticated next to her in his black Chesterfield overcoat and the white cigarette in the corner of his mouth. If she tried, she could pretend that they were going to a house party in the country. "Do you like it?" Dexter asked, grinning. "I'm overwhelmed." "I have something else," he said. In the pocket of his overcoat, he had a silver flask. He unscrewed the cover, and the cover became a little silver cup. "Bonded bourbon. I just had gin." "That's all right. It's not the combination that makes people sick, it's the quantity. Drink up." She took the little cup from him and swallowed the contents in one gulp, as if it were medicine, swallowing again to keep it down. She shuddered and felt better. They were on the broad highway now, heading for New Jersey, the car rocking from side to side as they sped along. Through the open windows came the sulfur smell of the factories along the New Jersey flatlands, making April feel like retching. She leaned out of the window, and all of a sudden, the mile-long limousine with the 2 of them in it, and the liveried chauffeur, and the armful of roses, and the soft music, and the hip flask of bourbon wasn't glamorous anymore. It was ridiculous. They were 2 frantic, stupid people speeding through an ugly-smelling countryside to attend the murder of love. It was limousines like this that people rented to go to weddings and to funerals. Had anyone ever rented one before to go to an abortion? She should by all rights be going to her wedding now, and instead, she was possibly going to her funeral. April glanced at Dexter. She wondered whether he had ever really loved her at all. Dexter was quietly drinking bourbon from his flask, directly from the neck of it. Perhaps he needed it as much as she did to calm his nerves. Perhaps it still wasn't too late after all. "Dexter." "What?" We could get married secretly in New Jersey and then tell people that we were secretly married 6 weeks ago. They would never know the difference. But at the back of her mind, April knew it was a lame excuse, more a chance for Dexter to prove he really did love her. Dexter, that's crazy, Dexter said. You know it is. No one would believe it for a minute. They would laugh. Not once we were married. When you're really married, people don't laugh. We're not going to discuss it anymore, honey. It's all arranged. April wrung her hands together, feeling her nails cutting into the skin and really not feeling the pain at all. Everything was falling away. Everything, until she could hardly even believe in his promises for the future. He had betrayed her now, so might he not desert her again later? You said we could have other babies later, when we're married, she said. Sometimes people who have abortions can't ever have any more children. But that, too, she knew, was only an excuse, a feeler to see if there were any promises left that she could believe in, or if marriage, love, and security were things that belonged to a past that had somehow eluded her. Everything will be all right, Dexter said with a hint of petulance in his voice. I told you. He screwed the top back on the flask and put the flask into his coat pocket. April watched his hands, hardly knowing them. They were the hands of a stranger. Then he looked at her with his face surprisingly clear and guileless. We can get married this spring if you like, he said. Her heart turned over. Warmth came back slowly, bringing the frozen dead to life. I'd like that, she said. And then with real feeling, oh, I'd like that very much. She hugged his arm with both her arms, and Dexter looked down and kissed her. The lights of the town sped toward them, shimmering, haloed, and not so terrible after all. The place where Dexter Key took April was not a doctor's office in the conventional sense of the word, but what at first glance seemed to be simply a door set among a row of stores in the commercial section of town. If you were not particularly looking for it, you would be sure to miss it. There was a small brass nameplate on the wall beside the door, brownish with age and not very legible, reading, Dr. Thomas, Surgeon. Behind the door was a flight of narrow stairs leading almost straight upward, like a ladder. The stairs and the walls were painted a light pea green. At the top of the stairs was a corridor leading to a locked door. Dexter rang the bell. A buzzer rang and clicked from within, and Dexter pushed the door open. He led April inside. There was a small square waiting room with some silent people in it. April had not expected other people. She had thought she and Dexter would be alone, and she was so startled at the sight of them that she almost turned to flee. There was an elderly woman, very thin and obviously much too old to be here for anything to do with childbirth, sitting quietly with her hands folded on her lap. She had a great growth on the side of her neck. There was a plump and frowsy-looking girl about 19 years old with reddish nostrils and pink-rimmed eyes, twisting the handle of her plastic pocketbook around her forefinger and sitting next to a boy who looked not much older than she, uncomfortably dressed up in a cheap-looking brown suit. She looked to April exactly like someone who needed an abortion. The three of them looked up when they heard April and Dexter enter, looked at them and down again. April put her ringless hands into her coat pockets. The room was filled with overstuffed and shabby-looking furniture, done in colors that reminded April of the words dun and puce. There were lace antimacassars on the arms of the sofa and chairs, although the upholstery was too far gone for them to do much good. But the room seemed to be very clean. On a spindly table next to the sofa was a pile of ragged old magazines. April was afraid to touch them for fear she would catch some disease. She sat down next to Dexter on the sofa and unbuttoned the top button of her coat. "Do you want to take your coat off?" he murmured politely. "No, thank you." Directly in front of her on the wall, There was a framed print of a watercolor depicting a shaggy collie dog being hugged around the neck by a little boy. Underneath the print, in small red letters set into a white banner, were the words, "Man's Best Friend." Somehow that struck April as amusing. She smiled and fixed her eyes upon it, reading it over and over again for comfort. If the doctor could put up a picture like that, he couldn't be such an ogre. A nurse came out of the back room, wearing a clean, starched white uniform and a hairnet. She wore heavy white shoes and had a cold, lined face. April stared at her from head to toe as she crossed the room with a small blue watering can in her hand and sprinkled a plant that was standing on a table in front of the window. The window looked down on the commercial street, but the pane had not been washed for a long time, and there was a cross-hatching of what looked like chicken wire set into the glass, so you could hardly make out the view. The nurse finished watering the plant and went back into the rear room. It seemed to April like a callous gesture when the patients trembling out here obviously needed the nurse's attention more than the potted plant did. She looked at her watch. It was 6:30. She realized with a start of embarrassment, because it seemed so out of place, that she was hungry. She tried to think of some casual conversation to make with Dexter. He was reading a magazine. He was reading a magazine. She could see his eyes moving from side to side as he read the lines. How could he be so calm? The nurse emerged again and nodded briskly at April. "You can come in now," she said. April touched Dexter's arm. He looked up from his magazine and smiled at her. "Go ahead," he whispered. "If you want to leave your coat here, I'll watch it for you." She shed her coat and left it lying in a heap on the sofa. The other patients who were waiting glanced up at her for an instant as she walked, terrified, across the room. From the expressions on their faces, she could tell that their only feeling was mild jealousy that she, the latest arrival, had been allowed to see the doctor first, while they had to wait and miss their dinners. It was strange that afterward, April could hardly remember what had happened in the doctor's office. On the way home, she wanted to describe it to Dexter, but all she could say was that, yes, it had hurt, but she really couldn't remember about the hurting. It was more a fact than a feeling. The doctor had looked exactly as she had imagined him, except that his fingernails had not been long and dirty at all, but clipped and very clean. The nurse had given her a sedative pill and a paper cup of water. With that and the bourbon and gin she had drunk, and her numbing fright, and her eyes tightly closed the entire time of the operation, the whole experience seemed like a half-remembered dream. When she was dressed to leave, the doctor gave her 6 different envelopes of colored pills. They were to pep her up and calm her down, stop the bleeding and make her sleep, and as soon as he had explained to her what each was for, she immediately forgot it. He had written on the outside of each envelope how many she was to take each day, and that was all she knew. She hardly even noticed the trip in the limousine to Port Blair for her overwhelming sense of relief. She loved the doctor. He was kind, and she wished she had given some of her roses to the nurse. Her tongue felt fuzzy. She couldn't believe anything had happened. She only had the slightest sense of discomfort, and she had to tell herself she didn't have her baby anymore. Perhaps they had made a mistake and not taken the baby at all. She had read about that once in one of her confession magazines. She hoped the doctor had taken the baby. She couldn't bear it if he had only hurt it and left it to grow up deformed. When she had left, the doctor had said, "Everything will be just as it was before." She knew what that meant. It meant forget. All this never happened. Tomorrow you will forget it. Tomorrow you will be well. When they drove up to Caroline's driveway, the lights were on above the front door. Caroline came out of the house when she heard the car. She peered anxiously at April's face in the darkness and glanced at Dexter questioningly. "She'd better go to bed," Dexter said. "I sent my parents to the movies," Caroline said. April opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She felt drugged. How funny it would be, how it would startle them, if she were to ask as if nothing had happened. Oh, what movie did they see? But she couldn't speak. She felt too tired. She felt a rising and lowering as he climbed the stairs. She closed her eyes and heard footsteps and murmuring voices and felt the coolness of a pillowcase. Oh, she tried to say. What movie did they see? But the thought of the words swung around her in a great arc and swallowed her up. April slept soundly until 8 o'clock in the morning, turned over luxuriously in the guest room bed, and drifted off into a dream. There was a little boy about 3 years old, dressed in a light blue cotton suit, with Dexter's face and eyes and her fair hair. He was half running along the edge of the little lake in Central Park, the one where children sail their toy boats in fine weather. He was following his boat, skipping and running, and April saw herself standing nearby, next to a park bench. She knew in the dream that he was her child, and she was smiling with love for him. Suddenly, something catapulted her forward, and she was pushing the child into the lake, feeling the resiliency of his small body against her hands. He did not even protest. He only looked at her with astonishment and the beginning of the realization of betrayal. It was she who was protesting, crying and screaming with the tears running down her face and hurling him into the lake regardless, powerless to stop. He sank to the bottom as cleanly as an angel flies. There was no struggle. He was simply dead. She knew from looking at him through the layers of murky blue and black water that he had died. It was she who felt the choking of drowning lungs. It was she who struggled for breath, feeling against her hands even at that moment the outline of the innocent body. She woke up crying and lay there crying for a long time afterward, not quite sure why. I killed him, I killed him, I killed him. I hate Dexter, she murmured to herself, long after she knew it had been only a dream. Was it a kind of mystic dream? Was that what her child would have looked like had he lived? She slept fitfully until afternoon, when Caroline came to open the blinds and give her a glass of orange juice. In those few hours, dreams came and went, all of them horrible, all of them wakening her with tears and fright. In every dream, the child was a boy, and he was always 3 or 4 years old, never a tiny baby. April became sure that the dreams contained something of the supernatural, that she was seeing the only glimpse she would ever have of the baby, who was vanished forever. Did you sleep well? Caroline asked. I kept dreaming. I don't wonder, Caroline said. You had a hard day yesterday. You'll rest up this weekend. Which pills do you have to take? She was pouring out the pills onto April's palm, counting them, arranging for everything like a nurse. Do you think you can make it downstairs to lunch? I have to wash my face. I unpacked for you last night. Your clothes are in the closet and your toothbrush and things are on the sink. The white towels are yours. April got out of bed and walked gingerly to the mirror. Her face was white. Her eyes had dark shadows under them. She looked anemic. Perhaps she had lost a lot of blood. She didn't really care. If you start to feel faint or anything, give a yell. I'll be lurking in the hall. Thank you, April said. When April had washed and dressed and combed her hair, she felt utterly drained. Her movements were automatic. She felt as though something very sad and useless and unavoidable had happened to her, but she could not quite figure out what it was. It was as though she had put a great guilt secret out of her mind, but its imprint remained, hovering, waiting to grow again into the dreaded original. I won't think about it anymore today, she told herself firmly. Caroline's mother was standing in the dining room, arranging leaves in a bowl of fruit that stood on the center of the table. She had met April once before, in New York. Hello, April, she said warmly. Hello, Mrs. Bender, how are you? Oh, fine. There were 4 at the table, Caroline and April and Caroline's parents, Caroline's younger brother, was visiting friends of his. The colored maid brought out cups of bouillon. Dr. Bender ate silently, watching the women with a look of amusement on his face. It was as if he knew he was outnumbered and would have to spend the entire meal listening to gossip, and had determined to make the best of it, and even like it. April could hardly meet his eyes. She wondered whether he would think she was pale. "I saw Kitty today," Mrs. Bender said to Caroline. "She certainly has her troubles." "Why?" asked Caroline, buttering a roll. "You know that nice son of hers, the oldest one who was just graduated from Princeton?" Mrs. Bender turned apologetically to April. "Forgive us for talking about people you don't know, but I hardly ever see my daughter anymore since she's working and has her own apartment, so when she favors us with a visit, I have to catch up." "I don't mind at all," April said. "Excuse me," said Caroline, and turned to the maid. "April takes milk." "I wish you'd drink milk," said Mrs. Bender, "instead of all those martinis." "Oh, Mother," Caroline said, laughing. "That's why April has such beautiful teeth," Mrs. Bender said. "I never drink milk," April thought, glancing at Caroline. "It's just now when I'm sick. If she only knew." "All right," said Caroline. "All right. I'll have some milk, too." "Good for you," said her mother. She helped herself to some cold roast beef from a platter the maid was passing around. "Anyway, poor Kitty. You know her son was going to go to medical school. He was accepted in 3 of them. And during the summer, he got mixed up with a girl. I won't say exactly what kind of girl, but she's the type who won't stop at anything to get what she wants. She's a model in a department store, but she's not pretty. I don't know why she was hired, except she has a well-proportioned figure. Now, here's a boy with more money than he can spend, a wonderful future, handsome and popular as can be. You should see the girl, hard as nails. She was obviously after his money, because for her birthday he bought her a mink stole. Can you imagine? Everybody knew something funny was going on. April cut her roast beef into tiny pieces and tried to eat one, but it stopped at her throat. Well, Kitty just kept hoping, closing her eyes to what was going on. How can you tell a 21-year-old boy what to do? Believe me, Kitty cried her eyes out in secret. The next thing we knew, that girl got herself pregnant and now he's going to marry her. Dr. Bender looked up with a twinkle in his eye. If she got herself pregnant all by herself, as you seem to imply, I'd like to meet her. She'd make a fascinating medical history for an article I could write. You know what I mean, Mrs. Bender said. Those girls know how to hook a man. Don't tell me they don't know how to be careful. She glanced around the table. April, dear, you aren't eating a thing. Would you like some mustard for your roast beef? No, thank you, April said. It's very good roast beef. We had it last night. I'm sorry you came too late for dinner. So am I, April said. Her voice was hardly audible. Well, anyway, Mrs. Bender continued cheerfully. This girl is 2 months gone, and Mother, Caroline interrupted with a touch of acerbity. We have a wonderful new book coming out that I know you'd love to read. I'll try to steal one of the first copies and bring it home for you next time I come. That'll be nice, Mrs. Bender said. You'll probably be coming in about 10 days to go to that wedding. You can see the gloating bride and the poor foolish boy. She shook her head. You know, you read about these things happening all the time, but if it ever really happens to someone you know, it's such a shock. It's just a shame, a nice young boy like that with his future ahead of him. Now he'll have a stigma over him for the rest of his life. Don't be dramatic, Mother, Caroline said dryly. She turned to April. My mother's just peeved because she had her eye on him as a prospect for me. Oh, Caroline, her mother said. April could see the room moving in waves of color. She looked down at her plate. The roast beef looked so bloody where she had cut it that it turned her stomach. She could taste something like the beginning of tears in the back of her throat. Well, Mrs. Bender said lightly, We won't talk about such gruesome things. We'll just be glad we don't hear about more people like that, or at least no one we know." She smiled at April. "You don't eat a thing, April. No wonder you're so thin. You and Caroline, you must be trying to starve yourselves to death." "It wouldn't be such a bad idea," April was thinking. She smiled weakly at Mrs. Bender and concentrated on her plate, trying to hear the words it was saying, the moral pronunciamientos, the shared hypocritical grief, the shocked glee. She wondered whether things like that would affect her now, this way, for the rest of her life.